He couldn't be controlled, not by society, not by God, not by the expectations of women. Max Stirner, a man whose name they buried because his ideas were too wild to tame. He didn't rebel to belong. He rebelled to own himself. And in a world addicted to control, that made him dangerous. In a world obsessed with labels and boxers, there's one thing that terrifies the masses: a man who does unbelong to any of them. This is the true story of Max Stirner, a philosopher ahead of his time. This is the story of the man women couldn't control. There once lived a man named Max Stirner in a time where everyone wanted to save the world. Marx dreamed of communism. Christians dreamed of heaven on earth. But Stirner dreamed of something different. In 1806, he was born in a small town, far from the great halls of academia. Stirner wasn't meant to be a professor. In fact, he was considered an outsider, but his mind was a powerhouse. His mother had a dream for him, to become a priest, a servant of God. But life had other plans. He fell ill and his voice was taken from him. No longer could he preach or read holy scriptures. At 17, he left school and wandered around Germany. He took odd jobs, earning enough to study philosophy, to ponder the nature of existence, to question everything. As a young man, he married and settled down, but war soon shattered his peace. Conscripted into the Napoleonic army, he became a medic, tending to wounded soldiers. For 5 years, he witnessed death, destruction, pain. When he returned home, he was a changed man. The quiet intellectual was gone, replaced by a shell of his former self. It took 2 years just to learn to speak again. But slowly, as he grappled with the darkness of war, something began to emerge. His experiences fueled his writing and he published his first book, criticizing religion. In 1835, he moved to Berlin, the heart of intellectual Germany. And here, in the land of ideas, his real journey began. At the center of his philosophy stood one concept: egoism. But this wasn't about selfishness. It was about ownership. He realized that all relationships were based on one thing: power. God demanded worship. Society demanded obedience. The state demanded taxes. And women, they demanded love, commitment, and security. All of these relationships were built on the idea of ownership. If you don't obey, you're punished. If you don't conform, you're an outcast. But Stirner argued against this. What if a man stopped being a pawn in everyone else's game? He began to write his masterpiece, a book that would forever change how we think about freedom. He called it The Ego in its own. In it, he laid out his philosophy. The problem, he said, is that we're taught to think in terms of duty, in terms of what's expected of us, in terms of what will bring us closer to God, closer to society, closer to our partners. But what if we flipped that script? What if we started thinking in terms of what we want, what we desire, what we demand? And this is the key point that sets Stirner apart. He didn't advocate for chaos. He wasn't a nihilist. He wasn't a destroyer. He was a liberator. He proposed a society based on freedom, not as in anarchy, but as in true personal freedom. He asked a simple, yet profound question. Why should you do anything unless you want to? Why should you obey laws you don't agree with? Why should you stay in a job that drains you? Why should you endure a relationship that doesn't serve you? In each of these cases, the answer boils down to one thing: ownership. We're not our jobs. We're not our relationships. We're not our past mistakes. We are our choices. We are what we decide to be. Now, this might sound like a call to abandon everything, to reject society, to turn our backs on love. But that's not what Stirner taught. He taught us to reevaluate our commitments. He taught us to look at our relationships with a critical eye and ask, is this serving my unique self? Or to put it another way, who am I? What do I want? And what do I demand from myself and from those around me? This is the egoist man, not the selfish, self-centered individual, but the man who refuses to be a slave, the man who refuses to be a puppet. He's the man who takes responsibility for his life and his choices, the man who decides what he wants and goes for it, the man who won't settle for less. Stirner's ideas shook the very foundations of traditional society. He challenged the status quo, calling out the hypocrisy and the corruption that lay beneath the surface of everyday life. He questioned the motives of those in power, exposing the ways in which they manipulated and controlled the masses. Many saw him as a dangerous man, a threat to the established order, a troublemaker who stirred the pot just for the sake of it. But Stirner didn't care. He was willing to be labeled a heretic, a madman, a revolutionary, if it meant that people would start to wake up, to see the world for what it really was, to take control of their lives and make choices that were true to themselves. It's a powerful message, one that continues to resonate with people today. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us what to think, what to say, how to behave, and who to vote for, Stirner's call for freedom and autonomy is like a breath of fresh air. It is a reminder that we have the power to make our own decisions and that we should be afraid to stand up for what we believe in, even if it means going against the grain. But this message didn't just resonate with the mass, it also caught the attention of those in positions of power. And let's just say they weren't happy. The authorities didn't like Stirner's ideas. They saw him as a threat, a danger to the status quo, and so they tried to silence him. They censored his books, banned his writings, and even put him in jail. But Stirner didn't back down. He continued to speak out against injustice, against inequality, against the corruption of power. He knew that the only way to bring about real change was to expose the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. Yet amidst all this opposition, Stirner's ideas spread like wildfire. People were drawn to his message of freedom and autonomy. They saw in him a champion of the underdog, a voice for those who felt silenced and ignored by the establishment. But tragically, Stirner's story doesn't have a happy ending. He died believing that his ideas would change the world, but the world had other plans. After his death, his ideas were buried, ignored, erased from history books. He became a footnote, a memory, a name whispered in the shadows. Yet his ideas didn't die. They lived on in the minds of those who had heard his message, in the hearts of those who had found strength in his words. And today, his legacy lives on. More than ever, people are waking up to the need for personal responsibility, for autonomy, for freedom. They're tired of being told what to think, how to act, how to live their lives. They want to be in control of their own destinies. And in that sense, Stirner's ideas are more relevant today than ever before. So remember the name Max Stirner, the man who dared to go against the grain, who dared to challenge the status quo, who dared to speak out against injustice. Remember the man who couldn't be controlled because his spirit lives on in each of us? Who am I? What do I want? And what do I demand from myself and from those around me? These are the questions that Stirner's philosophy raises, questions that we must ask ourselves if we want to truly be free. Thank you for watching. And until next time, remember, a man who can't be owned can't be sold anything.